I walked out of Buckley after a 12-hour shift, the kind where your legs feel like you're walking on borrowed time and your brain is running on fumes and caffeine. All I wanted was my car, my seat heater, and absolute silence for the drive home. Instead, I stepped into the cold air, crossed the lot toward my usual spot, and stopped so fast a guy behind me nearly walked into my back. My parking space was empty. Not, someone parked slightly crooked so it looks empty. Not, maybe I forgot where I parked. No. Empty as in nothing but asphalt and a faded white line. My 2021 Camry, the one I'd finished paying off last month after 4 years of ridiculous interest rates, was simply gone. I stood there blinking like my eyes were buffering. This lot was restricted to personnel assigned to our sector. Not exactly a place random people wander in to steal a car. Besides, the base had security. Cameras. Patrols. I wasn't parked in some sketchy strip mall lot at 2 a.m. I was standing in the middle of a military installation with a missing vehicle. I walked the entire row just to make sure my brain hadn't short-circuited from lack of sleep. Same result. No car, no broken glass, no tire marks, no nothing. It was like my Camry had simply gotten up and walked off. After a full minute of staring like an idiot, I pulled out my phone. The rational part of me was whispering, "Call security forces." The exhausted part of me said, "Call your mom. Maybe they know something." And because exhaustion usually wins, I tapped on Mom first. She answered on the second ring, all cheerful and casual like she was baking cookies or watering plants. "Hey, sweetheart." "Mom," I said, already feeling my pulse jump. "Do you know where my car is?" "Oh, relax," she said with that tone that always means I'm about to hear something stupid. "Madison took it. She needed it for a job interview this morning." "No." I froze so hard the cold felt warm compared to the heat rushing to my face. "She what?" "She took the car," Mom repeated like I was hard of hearing. "You weren't using it." "I was at work, Mom. On base. How did she even get the keys?" "Oh, we let her take them last night." "You were already asleep when we stopped by." "Stopped by, at my apartment. Took my spare key. Handed it to my sister like they were passing around a casserole dish." I had the kind of silence where your brain is trying to reboot from anger overload. "Mom, that's my car. You can't just—" "She needed it more, Natalie. Don't make a big deal out of this. She had a very important interview." I had to pull the phone away before I said something regrettable. My sister, Madison, is 26 and has had more very important interviews than I've had birthdays. She quits jobs like most people quit gym memberships, usually after a whopping 2 weeks of effort. But apparently she needed my car, the one I paid for with deployments and holiday shifts, more than I did. Before I could respond, Dad's voice came through in the background, loud and annoyed. "Why is she freaking out? Tell her to stop being dramatic." "Dramatic? Sure. Let's all pretend that taking someone's only car without permission is totally normal behavior." I bit my tongue so hard I'm surprised I didn't taste blood. "Mom," I said, forcing my voice to stay level, "Madison has wrecked 2 cars already. That Camry is the only reliable vehicle I have. I need it to get to work." "She'll bring it back after the interview," Mom said. "Stop being selfish." Selfish, of course. The family favorite word, selfish for wanting the thing I own to stay with me. Selfish for not wanting my unreliable, permanently chaotic sister behind the wheel of something I'd finally earned on my own. Selfish for apparently existing. I didn't trust myself to continue that conversation, so I hung up before my mouth could catch up with the anger flooding my head. My hands were shaking as I opened my phone again, but this time, I didn't call my parents. I didn't call base security. I went straight for 911 because, frankly, enough was enough. 911? What's your emergency? "My vehicle was stolen," I said, staring at the empty space like it had personally insulted me. A 2021 Toyota Camry, silver Colorado plates. "No." "When did you last see the vehicle?" 5 this morning when I parked it here for work, and before you ask, no, it wasn't towed, and yes, I'm sure. "Do you know who may have taken the vehicle?" I took a deep breath. This was the embarrassing part. My sister. She took it without my permission. My parents gave her my spare key. There was a brief, almost sympathetic silence on the operator's end. A silence that said she had heard this kind of thing before. "We'll dispatch an officer to take your statement." I thanked her and hung up, then leaned against the closest lamppost because I needed something solid to keep myself upright. The air felt colder, sharper, like the whole world had decided to take a giant step away from logic. All I could think about was how easy it had been for them. They hadn't even called. Not a text. Not a note. Just took my key, took my car, handed it off to Madison because her important interview apparently outweighed my military job. And it wasn't like I could just shrug this off. I was on rotation for rapid response this week. If the base called me in for anything, I needed to be at my post within 30 minutes. There's no sorry, my sister took my car box to check on a late arrival form. I checked the time. If Madison had the car all morning, she was either in her interview, driving it around like it was her own, or already treating it like every other vehicle she touched, which meant I had no idea what condition it would be in when I got it back, if I got it back at all. A cold gust hit the back of my neck as I walked back toward the main building to wait for the responding officer. Even with the anger boiling under my skin, there was something else layered beneath it, something heavier. It was the realization that this wasn't just about a car. It wasn't even about Madison. It was the first moment in a long time where I finally saw my family exactly as they were, not as I kept pretending they might be. And I wasn't sure which part stung more. Cold air hit my face as I walked back toward the main building, and the sharp sting helped me stay focused while my mind kept replaying the same thought. Someone was going to have to treat this like an actual crime, even if my family refused to. My boots echoed on the concrete walkway, the sound steady enough to keep me from spiraling while I waited for the responding officer to arrive. I spotted the patrol SUV turning into the lot before I even reached the entrance. Officer Riley Harmon stepped out, adjusting her vest with the kind of practiced calm that immediately makes you feel like you're not losing your mind. She took one look at me, then at the empty parking space, and gave me a nod that said she'd seen this exact brand of ridiculous situation before. "You reported a stolen Camry?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." My voice came out tighter than I intended. "All right, let's get your statement." "No." She walked with me toward the empty space like it was a crime scene, which, honestly, it was. Something about the way she approached it made everything feel more legitimate, like maybe I wasn't the insane one for thinking this was absolutely not okay. "Who has access to your keys?" she asked, taking out her tablet. "Just me," I said, "and my parents have a spare key for emergencies." "Did you give them permission to use it?" "No." "That? Did you give your sister permission to take your car?" "Absolutely not." She nodded once, typing steadily. "Then this is unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. It qualifies as auto theft." Hearing someone in uniform say those words out loud hit me harder than I expected. All the anger from earlier, the disbelief, the shock settled into something sharper. Something solid, something like clarity. Riley asked for my ID, registration, insurance, and anything else that could help. I handed over everything without fumbling because military life teaches you to keep your documents organized even if your entire personal life is on fire. She studied each paper, her expression never changing. "You paid this off last month?" she asked. "I did." "That's a big accomplishment. Congratulations." The compliment landed strangely. Nobody in my family ever congratulated me for that. I just nodded. "All right," she said. "We'll enter it into the system and put out a bolo on the vehicle. If your sister is out driving it, officers will spot the plate pretty quickly." I exhaled slowly, almost surprised at how much weight lifted from my chest, just hearing someone else acknowledge what was happening. "Do you want to pursue charges?" she asked. The question didn't even feel real for a second. Pursue charges. Against my sister. My family. It was the kind of moment where you'd expect dramatic music or a moral crisis or some big emotional speech. But honestly, I was tired. I was tired of being the responsible one. The dependable one. The she-can-handle-it daughter. The one who never needed anything and therefore never got anything. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." Riley gave a small nod like she respected the hell out of that answer. "Okay, I'll finalize the report. If the vehicle is located, you'll get a call. In the meantime, you can pick up a copy of the case number at the station." I thanked her, and she headed back to her SUV. I stayed where I was for a moment, letting the cold settle into my bones while my phone buzzed nonstop in my pocket. My parents, of course. I didn't check. I wasn't in the mood to hear Mom accuse me of overreacting or Dad telling me I should think of the family. When I walked inside the building to start the paperwork for my shift log, I barely had my badge scanned before I heard my name. "Pierce," Master Sergeant Whitman called from his office doorway. He didn't sound angry, but he didn't sound thrilled either. "In here, now." I stepped into his office, and he shut the door behind me. His desk was covered in folders, readiness charts, and a half-empty mug of coffee that looked as tired as he did. "I got a notification from security forces," he said. "You reported a stolen vehicle." "Yes, Master Sergeant." His eyebrows raised a fraction. "Do you have transportation to get to and from base?" "Normally, yes," I said. "Just not today." He let out a slow breath and scratched the back of his neck. "You're on rapid response roster this week. You know the expectations. If we get activated, I need you here in 30 minutes. "I understand. I'm working on securing transportation." "Good. But I need you to know something." He leaned back in his chair. "A stolen vehicle report automatically flags during your clearance review. Doesn't matter that you're the victim. It still triggers an inquiry. Expect security to ask questions." Of course, losing my car couldn't just be a normal, everyday headache. It had to snowball into something that could threaten my career. My stomach twisted, but I kept my posture steady. "Yes, Master Sergeant. Now?" "And Pierce," he added a little softer, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this, just keep us updated." When I walked out of his office, the hallway felt narrower than usual. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the same way they always buzzed, but somehow it grated on my nerves today. My phone buzzed again, then again, and again. I finally checked the screen. 15 missed calls. 11 messages. All from Mom, Dad, and a couple of relatives I barely talked to. I didn't open any of them. I already knew the script. Madison needed help. I should understand. Family is everything. Why am I being difficult? Why am I embarrassing them? Why am I making a big deal out of just a car? Just a car that I paid off through years of overtime, deployments, and missed holidays. Just a car that let me keep my life stable enough to climb in rank. Just a car that I depended on so I didn't end up like my sister, flailing from one crisis to the next. My shift log took longer than usual because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, but I got through it. I walked outside again just long enough to see Riley drive away from the lot, the patrol lights reflecting faintly off the windows. For the first time since I saw the empty space, the anger simmering under my skin wasn't boiling anymore. It was concentrated, directed, sharper than before. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't panicking. I knew exactly what step I had taken, and I knew why. I wasn't doing revenge out of spite. I was doing it because nobody in my family had ever taken my boundaries seriously. Nobody had ever respected what I earned. Nobody had ever thought I might finally say no. So I did. And for once, it felt like the only choice that actually made sense. The hallway felt too bright as I stepped outside again, and the cold settled into my jacket while my mind drifted to places I'd spent most of my adult life avoiding. It wasn't intentional. It was more like the pressure cracked something open, and old memories slipped through before I could stop them. I headed toward the benches near the side entrance, mostly because I needed to sit before my legs gave out. The second I sat down, the exhaustion hit in a way that made everything blur for a moment, and with it came the same feeling I knew too well, the sense that nothing about this situation should have surprised me. Not really. Favoritism didn't start when Madison took my car. It started years before either of us had anything worth stealing. I remembered being 14 and bagging groceries at a tiny supermarket just to pay for school clothes that didn't come from the clearance bin. Madison, at 11, had a meltdown over wanting a new iPod. She got the iPod. I got told to stop being jealous of your little sister. I remembered the time Madison wrecked Mom's old Subaru when she was 18. She hit a mailbox because she was texting, and Dad paid the homeowner cash that same night to make it go away. When I pointed out that maybe Madison shouldn't be driving if she couldn't stay off her phone, Dad told me, "Don't kick her when she's down." Down was a generous word for someone who tripped because she refused to watch where she was going. Or the time she blew through her first college savings in one semester because she needed a new laptop, a weekend trip with friends, and a shopping spree that looked like she was preparing for a fashion apocalypse. When she dropped out 6 months later, Mom cried like someone stole Christmas. When I left for the Air Force, she barely blinked. She did ask if I could still come home for laundry. That part still makes me laugh, but not in a fun way. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, letting the cold bite through my trousers while the weight of those memories settled. The pattern had always been there. I just spent years pretending it wasn't because it's easier to think your family is imperfect than to think they're fundamentally unfair. I checked my phone again, not the text, just the time. The afternoon light was shifting across the parking lot, glinting off the few remaining cars. Mine should have been among them. Instead, I had a case number, a missing vehicle, and a sister who probably thought she'd done nothing wrong. The real reason I couldn't ignore any of this hit me like a punch to the sternum. It wasn't that Madison took something I paid for. It was that my parents helped her do it without hesitation, like the idea of taking something from me didn't even require discussion. Their default assumption was that my belongings and apparently my time, my effort, and my priorities were theirs to redistribute as they pleased. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't check the notification. I just held the phone, feeling the vibration fade, then shut the screen off. The silence after was almost comforting. A memory flicked into my mind of a Thanksgiving 3 years earlier. I'd gotten back from a 3-month training rotation and expected the usual awkward small talk and questionable casserole. Instead, I walked in to find Madison complaining loudly about needing a new car. Hers had died because she forgot to check the oil, which is apparently a thing people do. My dad turned to me and said, "You get good military pay. Maybe you can help your sister." I was 26. I had student debt, a used car with bald tires, and maybe $50 left after rent. When I said no, he stared at me like I'd denied a kidney donation. That was the first time I thought, maybe my family doesn't actually like me. Maybe they like what I can do for them. That thought felt too dark at the time, so I buried it. But sitting on that cold bench outside the base, I realized it wasn't dark. It was accurate. Another vibration from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. This time I looked, not at the messages, but at the missed call list. Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda, Aunt June, Grandma, and even one from a cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. It was like they'd formed a phone tree intervention committee. I locked the screen and stood up. My legs felt steadier now, maybe because the shock had settled into something solid. Something less panicked and more determined. I crossed the lot again, this time without looking at the empty space. It had already burned itself into my brain. Inside the admin building, the noise of printers, footsteps, and distant phones ringing grounded me. Work was predictable. Family wasn't. That's probably why I stayed in the military. Chaos outside, structure inside. It made sense in a way life rarely did. I walked toward the break room for a glass of water, trying to shake the chill from my hands. A couple of airmen were talking about some scheduling mix-up, but I barely heard them. My mind was still stuck between past and present, between the teenager who'd worked to earn every dollar and the adult who'd worked to earn every rank. Madison had never worked for anything, not really, and Mom and Dad still treated her like she needed protection from the consequences of her own choices. Meanwhile, I was treated like the family shock absorber, someone whose needs always ranked below Madison's crises. My water cup filled slowly from the cooler, the steady sound oddly calming. I took a long drink, feeling the cold hit the back of my throat. For a brief moment, it cut through everything else. What made today different wasn't the missing car. It was realizing that if I didn't do something now, this would never end. Today it was my Camry. Next time it might be my apartment key, or my money, or something that actually endangered my career. My family had learned a long time ago that they could push, guilt, and manipulate me into silence. Report the car stolen. That wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them. I stayed in the break room a few more seconds, just long enough for my breathing to fully settle. When I stepped back into the hallway, the building felt steadier under my feet. Not warmer, not easier, just steadier. The kind of steadiness that comes from finally recognizing a pattern and deciding you're done being part of it. My phone buzzed again, and I ignored it without hesitation this time. My sister might have taken my car, but she wasn't taking my clarity, or my boundaries, or whatever self-respect I still had left after years of being the family's designated problem solver. The sound of footsteps on the tile pulled my attention briefly, but nothing about the moment felt disruptive. My mind was no longer replaying old grievances or wrestling with guilt. Everything lined up with a kind of quiet, cold logic that made the next steps feel obvious. A gust of cold air followed me back outside as I pushed open the side door, and before I even reached the end of the walkway, my phone lit up again, with Mom's name flashing across the screen. I let it ring until it went silent, but almost immediately Dad's name replaced hers, buzzing like some kind of alarm I didn't remember setting. I didn't answer him either. I kept walking, boots crunching lightly on the thin layer of grit along the concrete, trying to hold on to the small pocket of clarity I'd carved out for myself. By the time I reached the small smoking area near the visitor lot, the phone buzzed again, this time a text from Mom. The preview alone was enough to raise my blood pressure. "Call me right now. This is serious." As if everything I'd been dealing with wasn't already serious. I should have ignored it. Instead, I opened the message, maybe out of habit or maybe out of some leftover instinct to do what she wanted. That instinct didn't last long. When the full message loaded, I felt my jaw tighten. "Your sister is upset. She told us she didn't know you'd make this into a police matter. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Fix this now." There were 3 things wrong with that message, and all of them pissed me off. 1. Madison knew exactly what she had done. 2. Fix this was code for make everything easy for everyone except yourself. And 3. My mother had apparently skipped right over, "Sorry your car was stolen," and gone straight to, "Your sister has feelings about facing consequences." I put my phone in my pocket and paced a few steps, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Before I'd even taken a full breath, the phone rang again. Mom. I hit accept, mostly because I needed to hear what level of delusion we were working with. She didn't waste a second. "Natalie, what is wrong with you?" she snapped. "I just got off the phone with your father. Do you realize what you've done?" "Reported my stolen car," I said. "Yes, I do realize." "You're being ridiculous. You know Madison needed that car." "I needed that car," I shot back. "It's mine." "You weren't using it." "I was at work. That's not the same thing." "Now." She huffed loudly, and I could practically picture her pacing around the kitchen like she always did when she thought she was right and the rest of us were too stupid to appreciate her logic. "This could ruin her job prospects," she said sharply. "She has a real chance with this interview. She can't have legal trouble right now." "Then she shouldn't have stolen a car." Mom gasped like I'd said something obscene. "Don't you dare use that word. This is family. You don't call it theft when it's family." "Says who?" "The law definitely does." There was a loud clatter on her end, probably a cabinet door or a spoon getting slammed around. "You're being cold," she said. "She is your sister, Natalie." "Your sister. And I'm your daughter," I said, "and you didn't think twice about taking something I needed to give to her." "We didn't take it, we borrowed it." "You took the key from my apartment without permission," I said. "That's not borrowing." "No." Silence. A heavy, irritated silence. Finally, she said, "Your father wants to talk to you." "I really don't." "He insists." Great. That meant this was about to escalate from guilt-tripping to full-on family intervention. Dad's voice cut in before I had the chance to protest. "Natalie, what exactly do you think you're accomplishing?" he demanded. "You're humiliating this family. Madison could have gone to jail because of you." "She could go to jail because she stole a car," I said. "A car she had no permission to take." "You are blowing this up into a scene," he growled, "and if you don't stop, you're going to tear this family apart." That line hit with the same tired punch it always had. I'd grown up hearing that taking responsibility for your own feelings was optional, but protecting Madison from reality was mandatory. "I didn't tear anything apart," I said calmly. "You and Mom did that when you chose her over me." "No." He made a sound that was somewhere between disbelief and anger, the same sound he'd make when the TV remote died, and he was certain it was a conspiracy. "Drop the report," he said. "Right now. Call them back. Fix it." "No," I said. "I'm not doing that." Dad clicked his tongue, a low, angry sound. "If you go through with this, you're going to regret it." I didn't bother responding. I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket before he could say anything else. The moment the call ended, my phone buzzed again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. Then another, and another. Aunt June. Grandma. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in half a decade. Apparently the family hotline was fully operational. One message preview read, "Natalie, sweetheart, you don't want to do this." Another said, "It's just a car. Don't ruin your family over a car." And my personal favorite, "Your sister is fragile. Don't be cruel." I locked the screen before I said something I couldn't take back, even in my own head. I walked toward the base entrance again, passing a couple of airmen chatting near the building. One of them nodded politely, and I nodded back, feeling oddly grateful for the moment of normalcy. Just people doing their jobs, living their lives, not demanding emotional labor from me. My phone buzzed again. This time I ignored it entirely and kept walking. Inside, I headed toward the vending machines, needing anything that wasn't a ringing phone or an angry voicemail. I grabbed a bottle of water and leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing while the fluorescent lights hummed faintly above me. A familiar voice came from down the hall. Pierce? I looked up to see Sergeant Kaylee Turner walking toward me with a coffee in hand. She had the kind of expression people get when they've heard just enough to know something's gone sideways. You all right? I didn't have the energy to sugarcoat anything. My sister took my car. My parents helped her. I filed a police report. Now my family is staging a full meltdown. Kaylee blinked, then let out a short laugh, not at me, but at the sheer audacity of the situation. Well, she said, that's one way to start the day. It's been a day, I muttered. She handed me the coffee she'd been carrying. You look like you need this more than I do. The gesture hit harder than it probably should have. I took the cup, and for the first time since stepping out into that empty parking spot, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen just a little. Kaylee shrugged. Look, some families use guilt like it's a sport. Don't let them weaponize it against you. Her words landed exactly where they needed to. I nodded, the warmth from the cup seeping into my hands while the hallway around me settled into something quiet and manageable. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I let it vibrate until it stopped. Whatever came next, I didn't feel like I was standing alone in it anymore. The coffee warmed my hands just enough to settle the shaking, and I stood there taking slow, steady sips while the steady hum of the building wrapped around me. For a moment, everything felt almost manageable until my phone rang again. I didn't recognize the number, but it had the same area code as the police department, and that snapped my attention straight back into focus. I answered. This is Sergeant Pierce. Miss Pierce, this is Officer Harmon. We located your vehicle. The shift in my chest was so immediate it felt physical. Where? Your sister was pulled over for a traffic violation. A patrol officer ran the plate and it flagged as stolen. She is currently in custody, and the vehicle is being transported to impound. I didn't react at first. Not from shock, more from the kind of disbelief that comes after years of knowing something exactly like this was going to happen and still being told to stop expecting the worst. What traffic violation, I asked. Faulty brake light and excessive speeding. Of course. Because if Madison was going to drive my car without permission, she might as well drive it like she was auditioning for a demolition derby. I'll need you to pick up the vehicle once it's processed, Officer Harmon continued. You'll also be contacted by the caseworker assigned to your sister. Understood. We'll notify you once the car is ready. She hung up, leaving me standing in the hallway with the kind of silence that swallows everything else around it. A couple of airmen passed by, talking about weekend plans, and for a second their voices felt like something happening in another universe. I moved toward the exit, the coffee forgotten in my hand, and by the time I stepped outside, cold air hit me with the force of a slap. My phone buzzed immediately. Dad again. I didn't answer. Then Mom. Ignored. Then a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, and a few seconds later the transcript popped up. It was Madison. I tapped it open, more out of morbid curiosity than anything. Sis, what the hell? They arrested me. I told them you were overreacting. Call them. Fix this. The entitlement practically dripped off the screen. There was no apology. No acknowledgement, just the assumption that cleaning up her mess was my natural responsibility. I deleted the voicemail without saving it. Before I even reached my carpool pickup spot, Dad's name flashed across the screen again. I almost let it ring out of spite, but some part of me wanted to hear how far they were willing to push this. I answered. Dad. What did you do? He barked. Why is your sister calling us from a police station? I filed a theft report, I said, because she stole my car. She didn't steal anything. She borrowed it because she needed it. She didn't ask. You didn't ask. You took my key from my apartment and gave it away. That is not the point, he snapped. The point is, she is in jail. Jail, Natalie. Do you understand how humiliating that is for us? There it was. The family theme song. Humiliation as the ultimate sin. Accountability as an avoidable concept. Dad, I said, this is what happens when you take something that doesn't belong to you. It's not complicated. You call your report in right now and retract it. I'm not doing that. You will, he growled, or your sister's future is ruined. Lek. I let out a tired laugh, the kind that slips out when you're too exhausted to filter anything. Her future is her problem. You are unbelievable, he hissed. You're choosing pride over family. I'm choosing boundaries over stupidity. Dad exhaled sharply, like he was physically restraining himself from yelling. If you walk away from this, he said, don't expect us to support you when you need something. No. A hollow feeling settled in my chest, not because the threat hurt, but because I knew he actually meant it despite the fact that I'd never asked them for anything since I left for the Air Force. I've never needed anything from you, I said, and I don't now. I hung up and slid the phone back into my pocket before he had the chance to keep digging. The cold air felt sharper as I walked, like the wind itself had opinions about my life choices. My steps echoed across the pavement until I reached the bench, where I sat again, holding the coffee cup like it was some kind of anchor. For a moment, I let myself acknowledge the quiet truth under all the chaos. I wasn't angry because my sister was arrested. I wasn't even angry that my family was screaming at me. I was angry because none of them even for 1 second had considered that I might be the one who needed support. The only question they asked was how fast I could fix the consequences of someone else's choices. Another buzz. Another voicemail transcript. This time from Grandma. Natalie, dear, your parents are beside themselves. Your sister is crying. Please stop this before it goes too far. Too far. The phrase hit me like a joke that wasn't funny. Too far was Madison taking my car without permission. Too far was my parents enabling her. Too far was trespassing into my apartment. Too far was acting like my career, responsibilities, and transportation didn't matter, as long as Madison got what she wanted. This wasn't me going too far. This was me finally stopping. I breathed out slowly, pressing the heel of my palm against my forehead. The base's flagpole squeaked faintly in the wind, and that small, steady sound grounded me more than anything else had all day. I checked the time. Only a few hours had passed since I'd walked out to an empty parking spot, but the day already felt like an entire lifetime compressed into one afternoon. Footsteps approached, and Kaylee appeared beside me again, this time holding her own coffee. You look like someone who just got news, she said. They found my car, I said. Madison got arrested. Kaylee raised her eyebrows. Well, that'll do it. My parents are losing their minds. I bet they are, she said. People who rely on someone never expect them to stop cooperating. The accuracy of that sentence hit harder than anything my family had said. I leaned back against the bench, letting the metal cool against my shoulders. Kaylee didn't push for more details. She just sat with me, sipping her coffee in silence. It was nice. Quiet. A kind of stillness I didn't realize I'd missed. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. Whoever it was, I already knew it wasn't going to be helpful. Without meaning to, I found myself staring at the horizon beyond the parking lot, the hangars, the distant runways, the open sky that always made the base feel bigger than my problems. And in that moment, something settled into place inside me with the weight of certainty. My car was found. My sister was in custody. The chaos was finally shifting away from hypotheticals and into reality. And for the first time all day, I felt something close to steady. A thin layer of late afternoon sun stretched across the pavement as I headed back toward the main building, and the chill in the air felt sharper than before. It cut straight through my uniform jacket in a way that made me wish I had grabbed an extra layer, but the cold wasn't what kept me tense. It was the buzzing in my pocket, another message, another call, another demand from someone who wasn't living with the consequences I was. By the time I stepped inside, the base felt different, even though nothing had changed. Same halls, same dull hum of fluorescent lights, same stale coffee smell drifting from the break room. But there was a weight now, something pressing right between my shoulders. Military life has a talent for turning personal problems into professional liabilities, and my missing car had already crossed that line. I still had paperwork to finish for the end of my shift, but before I could even make it to my desk, Staff Sergeant Mills from Security Forces waved me down. Pierce, he said, security needs a statement about the stolen vehicle report. I blinked. I gave a statement to the responding officer. Yeah, they need a separate one for the internal log. Something about potential readiness impact. Readiness. The magic word. The one thing you never want to hear attached to your name unless someone's saying outstanding afterward. All right, I said, keeping my voice even. Where do I go? Mills pointed down the hall toward a small office that always smelled faintly like printer toner and desperation. The kind of room that makes you straighten your posture out of pure survival instinct. Inside, a sergeant from Security Forces sat behind a metal desk, tapping on a keyboard like he was in a typing competition he didn't want to lose. He looked up briefly. Name and rank? Pierce, Staff Sergeant. He nodded. We need to confirm a few things. You reported your personal vehicle stolen. That correct? Yes. Vehicle used for transport to and from duty? Yes. Currently without transportation? For now. He typed quickly, barely looking at me between keystrokes. Any impact on your ability to respond to short-notice call-ins? I inhaled slowly. Potentially. The word tasted awful. Potentially. As if my worth in this uniform might hinge on how quickly I could find a ride if something went wrong. He finished typing, then gave me a curt nod. All right, you'll probably get flagged for a readiness check-in until this is resolved. Shouldn't last long. Thank you, I said. As I left the office, the full weight of that "shouldn't last long" sank in. Anyone who's worn a uniform knows the translation. If this becomes a pattern, you have a problem. And patterns, real ones or imagined ones, have a way of following you around. I walked toward my section, trying to shake off the tension twisting in my stomach. I made it about 3 steps before Master Sergeant Whitman stepped out of his office like he had been waiting for me specifically. "Pierce," he said. "Inside." I followed him into his office again, and he closed the door with a sigh that had enough frustration behind it to make me brace a little. "Security forces flagged your transportation status," he said, tapping a folder on his desk. "You're on rapid response rotation. I need to know if you can meet the 30-minute requirement." "I'll make arrangements," I said. "I'm working on it now." Whitman studied me for a long moment, his expression somewhere between concern and mild irritation. Not at me, exactly at the situation. "Look," he said, leaning back. "I'm not trying to hammer you, but you know how this works. If they think you're having personal instability, it'll show up during your next clearance review." "I understand," I said, "but I'm not unstable. My car was stolen." "And I get that," he said. "But remember, the review doesn't care whose fault it is, they just see the event." End of teen. That was the thing about military life. It's fair in some ways and brutally unfair in others. It doesn't care if you're the victim. It only cares that something happened. "I've already taken steps," I said. "I filed the report. They located the car. I'll get it back as soon as they release it." "That's good. Just keep me posted." He paused, his tone softening. "And Pierce, take care of yourself. You look like you haven't slept since Tuesday." He wasn't wrong. I probably had the same expression as someone who had just fought a bear and lost, but insisted everything was fine. "Yes, Master Sergeant." When I left his office, the hall felt narrower, like the walls had crept inward while I was inside. The base wasn't judging me, but the system was. The rules were. And those rules don't change just because your sister is an overgrown toddler with a driver's license. I made it to my desk, dropped into my chair, and immediately pulled up the shuttle schedule. There were options-based transportation, carpooling, borrowing a vehicle temporarily, but each one required coordination and some degree of goodwill from others. I could manage it, but it didn't erase the fact that I shouldn't have to manage it at all. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check the screen to know it was either Mom or Dad demanding I fix the mess they helped create. I ignored it and focused on sending a quick message to Kaylee. "Hey, any chance you're available for carpool this week if I can't get my car back today?" Her response came almost instantly. "Yeah, no problem, I can swing by. Don't stress about it." Simple, direct, zero drama. The exact opposite of every interaction I'd had with my family since the moment I walked out to that empty parking spot. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow exhale that felt heavier than it should have. The day had dragged on, and I still had a pile of work sitting in my inbox, but at least the logistics of getting to and from base weren't going to collapse under me. Another vibration from my pocket. Another voicemail transcript from Mom. "Your sister is traumatized. We raised you better than this." Raised me better? Sure. They raised me to work hard, stay quiet, and hand over whatever I earned to keep Madison from melting down. And now that I wasn't playing along, they suddenly wanted to take credit for my morals. I closed the transcript and set my phone face down on the desk. For a moment, I stared at the stack of maintenance forms, roster updates, and schedules waiting for me. Routine. Predictable. In a world where everything seemed designed to explode without warning, the paperwork was almost comforting. I picked up the first folder, flipping through the pages while the faint rumble of distant jets shook the windows. The base wasn't slowing down just because my family had lost their collective minds. The world kept spinning, the job kept going, and I kept breathing, even if each breath felt like it had to fight through 2 layers of frustration before it got any air. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the HVAC hummed, and somewhere down the hall, someone dropped a metal clipboard loud enough to echo through the entire building. I didn't flinch. Not because I was calm, because I was too tired to react to anything else today. I kept working, letting the repetition of checking numbers and signatures ground me. At least paperwork didn't demand apologies for other people's behavior. Somewhere between the fifth and sixth document, the noise around me faded into a kind of background blur, and I felt the tension in my shoulders finally loosen, not because anything had gotten easier, but because I'd stopped fighting the reality of what was happening. The military pressure was there, the family chaos was there, the stolen car was there. But so was I. And despite everything unraveling around me, I wasn't the one falling apart. The steady rhythm of paperwork eventually blurred into something almost meditative, and I let myself fall into it long enough to stop noticing every buzz from my phone. By the time I looked up again, the office lights had shifted to that late evening glow that always made the building feel a little too quiet. I rubbed my eyes, stretched my neck, and saved my work, but before I could stand, the phone vibrated again, this time with a different tone. A voicemail from an unknown number. I tapped the transcript open. "Miss Pierce, this is Kimberly Soto, public defender assigned to your sister's case. Please call when available." A public defender. That meant things had moved faster than even I expected. I hesitated a moment, thinking about the mess waiting on the other end of that call, but avoiding it wouldn't change anything. I hit call back. She answered on the second ring. "Miss Pierce, thanks for calling. 9." Her voice was calm, professional, and noticeably free of the guilt-laced undertone every member of my family had been using. "I'm calling about your sister," she continued. "I wanted to update you on the charges and discuss a possible agreement." I took a breath and leaned back in my chair. "Okay, what's happening?" "Your sister has been charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, a misdemeanor. It's not felony auto theft because the key was obtained through a family member. However, because you explicitly did not give permission, the charge still stands." There it was, the official translation for "your sister stole your car and your parents helped." "What does a misdemeanor mean for her?" I asked. "It depends on how cooperative she is," Soto said. "Right now she's extremely emotional and feels she's being treated unfairly." I let out a short breath. That sounds accurate. She claims she believed she had permission. I almost laughed. She didn't. 1. "I'm aware," Soto said, "and that's why I'm calling. We're trying to negotiate a plea deal with the prosecutor to avoid this escalating. I want to know if you're willing to accept one." "What does the deal look like?" She paused, as if organizing notes. 6 months probation, restitution for all impound and processing fees, 1-year driving suspension, and mandatory responsibility counseling. The logical part of me immediately recognized that as a reasonable outcome. But the part of me that had spent years playing the responsible child, the part that had been told to apologize even when Madison was the one who messed up, wanted something else. Would she have to admit what she did? "Yes," Soto said. "She'd have to sign a statement acknowledging she took the vehicle without your permission." "That's not enough," I said before I even fully thought the words. "What do you need, Miss Pierce?" I sat up straighter, feeling something solid settle beneath my ribs. "If she wants a deal, she has to read the statement out loud in court. I don't want this brushed under a rug the moment she gets home and starts rewriting the story. I want her to say it, publicly, without my parents talking over her." Soto didn't answer right away. I waited, wondering if she was going to tell me that wasn't possible or that I was being unreasonable. "That's unconventional," she finally said. "But possible? It's something I can take to the prosecutor," she said. "I can't promise they'll agree, but given the circumstances, it's not an outrageous request. It wasn't revenge, exactly not the kind you see in movies. It was accountability. And for once, I wanted my sister to feel the weight of what she had done without a dozen relatives cushioning her from reality." "All right," I said. "If she reads the statement in court, I'll accept the deal." "Zentrang." "I'll speak with the prosecutor tonight," Soto said. "You'll hear from us in the morning." We ended the call and I set my phone down slowly. The office around me felt different, like the air had shifted. Not lighter, exactly, but clearer. A moment later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Mom. "What did you say to the lawyer?" "They're telling us Madison might have to stand in front of a judge and humiliate herself. Call me back right now." I didn't respond. Another text came in from Dad. "If Madison has to read anything in public, that's on you." He still didn't respond. Then, like clockwork, Grandma. Natalie, please don't make things harder than they have to be. I placed the phone face down on my desk and let the silence settle. The thing no one in my family seemed to understand was that things were already hard. I wasn't making them hard, I was just not making them easy anymore. The office door opened, and Kaylee stepped inside without knocking, holding 2 energy drinks like she was about to perform some kind of emergency revival. You look like you're contemplating whether to scream into a pillow or punch a wall, she said. Neither, I replied. Just dealing with a lawyer. Her eyebrows lifted. For your sister? Yeah. Anything good? They want a plea deal. And I want her to admit what she did in court. Kaylee whistled softly. Damn. That's honestly fair. That's what I thought. She handed me one of the cans, and I cracked it open, letting the cold carbonation sting the back of my throat. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You know what your problem is? She said. I raised a brow. Oh, please enlighten me. You're too reasonable, she said. You think fairness is going to offend people who've never lived in fairness. Of course they're freaking out. You're messing with their favorite system. I snorted. What system? The system where you bail everyone out. She wasn't wrong, and hearing it from someone who wasn't related to me made the truth land even sharper. I finished half the drink before setting it on the desk. The carbonation fizzed quietly inside the can, filling the silence between us. I don't want to ruin her life, I finally said. I just want her to stop wrecking mine. That's not revenge, Kaylee said. That's self-respect. I let the words sink in. She was right. The whole situation had been framed like I was staging some dramatic family takedown. But the reality was far simpler. I was done being collateral damage. We stayed in the office for a few minutes, not talking much. Just existing in the same quiet space, the way people do when one of them has had a day and the other knows better than to ask too many questions. Eventually, I picked up my pen again and glanced at the unfinished paperwork spread across the desk. Kaylee pushed off the wall. I'll be outside if you need anything, she said. I nodded and returned to the stack of forms. The familiar routine helped settle the leftover tension, and the more I wrote, the more my thoughts lined up again. Somewhere between updating vehicle logs and initialing a maintenance form, the phone buzzed once more, not with panic or guilt this time, but with a simple notification from the police department. Case updated. Defendant in holding. Awaiting processing. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a fact. And for the first time all day, that was enough. The energy drink kept a steady buzz in my system as I finished the last of the paperwork, and by the time I logged out for the day, the sky outside the building had already dipped into that deep blue twilight that always made the base feel oddly peaceful. I stepped out into the cool air, letting the quiet settle around me as my boots clicked along the pavement toward the main lot where Kaylee was waiting to give me a ride home. The moment I got in her car, the smell of pine-scented air freshener hit me hard enough to snap me out of my thoughts. She glanced over. You all right? Define all right, I muttered, buckling in. Still breathing, not in jail, no major fires, those are my usual metrics. In that case, I'm fantastic. She gave a short laugh and pulled out of the lot. The sound of the engine and the soft hum of the heater filled the silence, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to talk. It was the kind of quiet that didn't demand anything from me. By the time we reached my apartment complex, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, another unknown number. Probably the public defender with an update. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. Miss Pierce? It's Kimberly Soto again. I spoke with the prosecutor, she said. They're willing to accept your condition. If Madison wants the deal, she'll have to read a full admission aloud in court. Now. I absorbed that slowly, the words settling in piece by piece. And she's willing to do that? Honestly, Soto said. She doesn't love it. She cried for a solid 30 minutes, but I explained the alternative. She'll take the deal. I leaned back in the seat, staring out the passenger window at the dim glow of the streetlights. All right, I accept. Good. I'll have the paperwork ready for the hearing. You'll get the official date tomorrow. No. We hung up, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't relief, more like a shift in weight. Something inside me finally stopped resisting gravity and just landed. Kaylee glanced at me. Good news? It's happening, I said. She'll take the plea. Good, she replied. She should. Inside my apartment, the silence felt heavier than usual. My spare key was still missing from the hook, where I kept it, another reminder of how easily my family had crossed the line. I locked the door behind me and double-checked the deadbolt, something I never used to do. The lights cast soft shadows across the living room as I set my bag down and sank into the couch. For a brief moment, everything felt still, warm, almost normal. That didn't last long. My phone lit up again. This time it wasn't unknown numbers. It was my mother. I thought about ignoring it, but something told me getting this over with might be easier than waiting for the next wave. I answered. Her voice hit with zero hesitation. I spoke to Madison's lawyer. Of course she did. You forced her into this, she continued. Do you understand what you're doing to your sister? Mom, I said calmly, she took my car. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't involve breaking into someone's apartment to steal a key. She didn't respond to that, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she didn't like the answer she had. Your father and I expect you to reconsider, she said. This public statement you demanded, this is humiliating. It's vindictive. It's honest, I said, and I want her to acknowledge what she did, out loud. You're being petty, she snapped. No, I said, I'm being clear. You're ruining this family. Mom, the only thing I'm ruining is the fantasy where Madison never faces consequences. She inhaled sharply, the sound tight and angry. Your grandmother is in tears over this. Nye. Grandma cries when the grocery store sells out of her favorite bread. That's not the point. Then what is the point? Silence. Deep, uncomfortable silence. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost the sharp edge. We raised you to be better than this. I laughed not loudly, but with enough disbelief to make it obvious. You raised me to clean up Madison's messes. That's not the same thing. She didn't answer. I wasn't sure if she couldn't or simply wouldn't. I'm done talking about this, I said. You wanted fairness as long as it only applied to me. That ends now. Her tone turned icy. Fine, if that's how you want to be. It's how I need to be. I hung up before she could say anything else. I stared at the dark phone screen for a long moment, listening to my own breathing settle. Another buzz came almost immediately. Dad this time. I didn't answer. Then my aunt. Then Grandma. Then a blocked number, which was definitely Madison using someone else's phone. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and leaned against the counter while the refrigerator hummed in the background. The normalcy of that sound grounded me more than any conversation had all day. My chest felt tight, but not the same way it had felt earlier. This wasn't panic, it wasn't guilt. It was a strange mixture of exhaustion and certainty, like I had finally stepped into the version of myself I should have been all along. I carried the water back to the couch and sat down, staring at the quiet room. The air felt clearer, sharper, like some kind of fog had finally lifted. For years, I'd been the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who held everything together, and my family had relied on that, exploited it, built entire expectations around it. But now, the choice wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And mine was simple. If Madison wanted to stand in a courtroom and pretend she was the victim, she could. But she would also stand there and say the truth out loud, in front of a judge, without my parents correcting her, defending her, or spinning some alternate version of reality. She would admit what she did. And I would be there to hear it. Not because I needed revenge. Because I needed honesty. And, for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what that honesty would cost. Morning sunlight slid through the blinds in thin, sharp lines as I tied my hair back and buttoned the collar of my uniform. The fabric felt stiffer than usual, and my hands moved slower than they should have. I wasn't nervous. I'd been through inspections, evaluations, deployments, but there was something about facing my own family in a courtroom that felt heavier than anything the military had ever thrown at me. I drove to the courthouse in a loaner car the base lent me for emergencies. The engine hummed quietly, unfamiliar but steady, and I kept one hand on the wheel while the other tapped restlessly against my thigh. Every stoplight, every turn, every exit on the way there felt too ordinary for a day like this. When I pulled into the courthouse lot, I spotted them immediately, my parents standing near the stairs, hovering like they were waiting for the morning news to interview them about their personal tragedy. Mom's arms were crossed. Dad was pacing. Grandma sat on the bench, clutching her purse like the trial was for murder. I didn't approach them. I walked straight past, my boots hitting each step with more confidence than I actually felt. I heard Mom call my name behind me in a thin, pleading voice, but I didn't turn around. Inside, the hallway echoed with every footstep. The fluorescent lights overhead gave everything a washed-out, sterile glow. I checked in with the clerk, signed my name, and took a seat outside courtroom 3B. The door opened moments later, and there she was, Madison. Her hair was pulled back in a sloppy bun, dark circles under her eyes, wearing an oversized hoodie like she had rolled straight out of bed into a legal proceeding. The instant her eyes met mine, her mouth tightened into the exact expression she had used as a kid whenever she knew she was caught but still wanted to blame someone else. Her public defender, Soto, stood beside her with a stack of papers and the patience of a saint. "Miss Pierce," she said, giving me a polite nod. Madison didn't nod. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," she muttered, arms folded tightly. I kept my voice even. "You're the one who agreed to the plea." "Because I didn't have a choice," she snapped. "You had the choice not to take my car." Her jaw clenched, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of shame or maybe anger at being reminded of reality. Before she could respond, the bailiff stepped out. "Reyes Madison, courtroom 3B. No." My parents rushed toward us from down the hall. Mom went straight to Madison, cupping her face dramatically, as if she were sending her off to war instead of a misdemeanor hearing. Dad glared at me, his voice low and venomous. "You're cruel." I kept my gaze steady. "No, I'm consistent." Grandma didn't say a word. She just looked tired. We walked into the courtroom, the shuffle of feet echoing through the space. The room was small rows of benches, pale walls, and a judge's bench that towered just enough to make everyone sit a little straighter. Madison stood at the defendant's table with Soto while I sat behind the railing, hands clasped loosely in my lap. My parents sat on either side of her like emotional bodyguards. I didn't join them. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and a sharper expression, entered, and everyone stood before sitting again. She glanced through the file. "Miss Reyes, you are here for unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. I understand there is a plea agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor," Soto said. "The defendant will read a statement as part of the agreement." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Madison looked down at the paper in her hands like it physically pained her. She cleared her throat, shoulders tense. "I, Madison Reyes, admit that I took my sister's vehicle without permission on September 12th. No." Her voice wavered slightly, and Mom made a tiny gasping noise behind me. Madison continued. "I knew the car was not registered to me. I knew I didn't have permission to use it. I took it anyway because—" She stopped, jaw trembling in a way that looked less like remorse and more like a tantrum about to happen. Soto whispered something to her, and Madison swallowed hard. "Because I wanted it, and I assumed she would forgive me." She stared at the paper, unable to look up. "What I did was wrong," she said, voice thin, "and I'm sorry." The judge studied her a moment. "Miss Reyes, do you accept full responsibility for your actions without explanation or excuse?" Madison hesitated. A long, painful hesitation. Finally, "Yes, Your Honor." "Very well. The court accepts the plea." Soto exhaled quietly. My parents both sagged with a mix of relief and embarrassment. Grandma dabbed her eyes. Madison stayed stiff, her hands shaking as she placed the paper on the table. The judge continued, "You will serve 6 months probation, pay restitution, and comply with all counseling requirements. You are prohibited from operating any vehicle for 12 months. Failure to comply will void this agreement." Madison nodded through clenched teeth. Then the judge looked at me. "Miss Pierce, thank you for your cooperation. You may speak privately with the clerk regarding vehicle release procedures." I nodded, my throat a little tight, not from emotion, but from the sheer weight of hearing authority finally back me up. After years of being dismissed, overridden, and guilt-tripped, it felt oddly grounding to have someone acknowledge the truth without argument. Court adjourned with the bang of a gavel. The sound echoed like a final period on a sentence I'd spent years writing without meaning to. As people filed out, Madison turned to me, her cheeks flushed red. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. I stood from the bench. "No, but I'm finally not responsible for your choices." Mom stepped between us instantly. "She's been through enough today. Don't talk to her like that." "Actually," I said, "for the first time in her life, what she's been through is exactly what she earned." Dad glared at me like I had slapped someone. "If you think we'll forgive you for this—" "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said. "I'm asking for accountability, and we finally got it." Grandma tugged lightly on Mom's sleeve. "Let's go home," she whispered. "Let the girls breathe." Madison stormed past me without another word, and my parents followed in a wave of disappointed glares. The doors closed behind them with a dull thud. I walked to the clerk's desk, collected the paperwork for my vehicle release, and stepped out of the courthouse into crisp afternoon air. The parking lot buzzed with faint traffic noise, and sunlight glinted off the windshields like nothing extraordinary had happened here today. But something had. Not revenge. Not victory. Just truth spoken out loud in a room where truth actually mattered. I walked down the steps with a steady breath, the tension in my chest finally loosening in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't mine to carry anymore. Cool morning air rushed past me as I stepped out of the courthouse parking lot, and for the first time in a long while, the weight sitting in my chest felt lighter. Not gone, just lighter in a way that let my shoulders drop and my lungs expand without resistance. My car was waiting for me at the impound lot, the paperwork sat neatly in my folder, and the day finally felt like mine again. A year passed before I realized how much that moment had shifted everything. It didn't happen all at once. It didn't happen with fireworks or some dramatic family confrontation. It happened in small, steady changes that built on each other, until one day I looked around and realized my life didn't resemble the one I'd been trapped in before. The first change was the silence. My parents stopped calling. Not gradually, immediately. They went from daily check-ins and constant requests to absolute radio static. No texts, no birthday messages, no passive-aggressive voicemails about Sunday dinners. They simply cut themselves off, the way people do when they want to punish you by removing themselves from your life. But instead of feeling empty, the silence felt like I could finally hear myself think. Work steadied out too. The readiness flag on my file cleared once I got my car back. Security forces did their follow-up questions, checked the documentation, and closed the matter. My clearance review went through without a hitch. Whitman called me into his office afterward just to say, "You handled that better than most people I know." I believed him. I wasn't flawless. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who finally stopped being a doormat long enough to walk forward on my own feet. The second change came a few months after the court hearing. A letter showed up in my mailbox, thin envelope, unfamiliar handwriting. I didn't recognize it until I saw the return address, a halfway house in the next county over. Madison. For a moment, I considered tossing it into a drawer and forgetting about it. But curiosity tugged harder than habit, so I opened it. Her handwriting was sloppy, like she'd been rushing. The message wasn't long. "I'm in counseling. Court ordered, but I'm actually going. I'm trying to figure out why I act the way I do. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not ready to give an apology yet either. But I'm working on myself, and I wanted you to know that." It wasn't warm. It wasn't affectionate. But it was honest in a way she'd never managed before. I put the letter back in the envelope and slid it into my desk drawer, not because it meant reconciliation, but because it meant reality finally caught up to her. That alone was worth keeping. A couple of months later, the next shift happened. My grandmother called. She was the only one I hadn't blocked, the only one who hadn't screamed, threatened, or demanded anything. Her voice wavered on the phone, warm and shaky with age. "Have you talked to your mother?" she asked. "No," I said simply. "She misses you. She knows where I live." Grandma sighed softly. "She won't come. She thinks you don't want to see her." "No." "Then she's finally right about something." There was a pause, long, thoughtful, and heavy. "People change when life forces them to," she said. "Not when you beg them. Not when you shield them. Only when the consequences finally land." "I know," I said. "And you," she continued, "have finally stopped shielding them." Her voice broke slightly, but not out of sadness, something closer to relief. "I'm proud of you." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just let her words settle, warm and unfamiliar in the best way. Another shift happened during deployment season. I spent 3 months overseas, working long shifts and getting used to the rhythm of barracks life again. When I came back home, everything felt easier, cleaner, calmer, like the air itself wasn't weighed down by expectations I could never satisfy. My apartment felt like mine again. My routine felt steady again. My car sat in its space every night, exactly where I left it. The steering wheel lock clicked into place with a satisfying finality each time. Not because I expected another theft, but because it symbolized something I hadn't noticed before. I wasn't protecting the car. I was protecting the boundary that kept my life intact. The biggest shift came near the end of that year. I got promoted. During the ceremony, Whitman gave me the kind of handshake that carried more meaning than the stripes being pinned to my sleeve. "You earned this," he said. "Every bit of it." Afterward, Kaylee clapped me on the back and said, "Look at you, thriving without drama. Almost like life gets easier when people stop stealing your car. I snorted. Can't imagine why. Back home, I changed out of my uniform and sat on the couch, letting the quiet settle around me in a way that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt deliberate, peaceful. The final shift came quietly one afternoon when another letter arrived, another one from Madison. This one was different, longer, written slowly, carefully. She told me she finished her counseling program. She'd gotten a part-time job at a hardware store. She was saving up for a car of her own, something used, something reasonable, something she said she wanted to pay for herself. She ended the letter with a line that didn't ask anything from me. I'm trying to be better. Whether you talk to me again or not, I needed you to know that. I folded the letter and placed it next to the first one. No reunion. No tearful apologies. No dramatic hug that solved everything. Just honesty. Finally, honesty. My parents never apologized. Not once. Not in a text. Not in a voicemail. Not in a letter. Not through grandma. Not in any way. And that silence? That told me everything I needed to know. They loved the version of me who made their life convenient, not the version who protected herself. I didn't grieve that loss. I accepted it. A year after the day my parking spot sat empty, I walked downstairs, unlocked my Camry, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior still held the faint scent of the cedar air freshener I liked. Everything was exactly where I left it. I turned the key, the engine hummed awake, and sunlight spilled across the dashboard. It wasn't just a car. It was proof. Proof that what I worked for mattered. Proof that my boundaries meant something. Proof that I was done living my life as someone else's safety net. People say blood is thicker than water. But respect? Respect is thicker than all of it. And finally, my life belonged to me.